recently bought a rifle that I've wanted for years. It's the Steyr AUG. Everybody knows what it is. It's the futuristic plastic looking gun that was built back in the 77, I believe. So thrilled to have it. One of the downsides to it though is it's got a god-awful horrible trigger. There's a company out there called 2020 Precision that kind of takes care of some of that. It just really just gets rid of the travel. The squishy plastic feel of it is just something you can't avoid. And I got it from another company called Rat Worx out of Illinois. But first thing you notice is that the directions that come with it are even worse than the trigger itself. So of course you get on YouTube and look for a video on how to do it. I'm somebody who's not afraid to take something apart. Actually, I enjoy it. But I like to have a pretty good idea what I'm getting into before I get into it. I'm not a gunsmith, so just knowing all that crap doesn't exist for me. But what I found was some videos were really good explaining every little piece, and some of them were horrible. Some of them you almost want them to be taken down. But one thing they all had in common was nobody really kind of showed you what it was. You know, it's these long distance views that you see the little trigger pack, but you can't see anything of what he's actually doing. So I'm trying to alleviate some of that in this. I'm going to do my best. At work right now, away from home, so I don't have any of my lightings, any of my other things that I normally make videos with. So we'll see how it turns out. So this is it. I've already taken the barrel and the receiver off. If you're thinking about already tearing into a trigger, you should probably already know how to take that off. Plus there's about a bajillion videos. That's how I can say that you don't need any tools. Is what I do is I just take the striker out, and it's pretty simple. You just squeeze these little tabs that flips up like that, and you just push it in a little bit and quarter turn it. You gotta kind of find the little groove, and it'll pop right out. This here, pretty simple. This is actually your pin right here to pull all this apart. There is a tab. There's actually a button right here in this old crease here. Just push on that and pull your pin at the same time. It all comes apart. The butt falls off. Trigger comes out. So this is the actual trigger group itself. Okay, it's almost 100% plastic. There's like 3 springs in here, and this here that are metal. The rest of it is completely plastic. So here's what we're gonna do. First thing you want to do is take the pressure off of the hammer. The easiest way to do that is just push down on the hammer, and then you're gonna pull back on this, on the sear. So just a little bit of pressure off, and then you just kind of wiggle it and it finds its way out. Pretty simple. That way when you go to pull these pins, this damn thing's not going to come flying apart on you. So here's where I started to get into issues. That pin there has to come out, and that pin there has to come out. But at the same time, so this needs to come out here. But this you do not want to come out. The little metal L kind of looks like the tail wing of a plane. You don't want it to come out. There's a tiny little spring underneath there that I guess from what I gather is a huge pain in the ass. Now if you do drift that pin out a little bit too far, because that's what we're going to try to do here, is drift this pin out to where you release this but don't release this. It's not like it's just going to fly out of there. It's currently being held in more or less by this little groove here, so it's not just going to come flying out and you just lost the battle. So don't freak out too much. So what we're going to try to do, this piece here needs to come out and just go that direction. So what we're going to try to do is drift that pin out to where we don't release this piece here, the metal piece. There's a little wall inside there that separates the two, a little plastic wall. So what we're going to do is drift the pin, this pin here, that direction. And at the same time, pull back on that. Slowly but surely, that'll break loose, and hopefully, if you're lucky, it'll get stuck in that little wall there. Just push it a little bit here and just get it started out. Don't get crazy with it because it's under enough pressure that it will just, you keep pushing and pushing and pushing, it'll just slam through there and you're screwed. So what we're doing is we're just pulling that direction on this pin here and pulling back on this here just a little bit. What I'm doing is I'm pushing up against this little wall here with my index finger here and just trying to just slowly, well, you know how to do something small. So we're just pulling a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time. And there, it broke loose. Okay, so as soon as that happens, push that pin back in. Now you're past it because this actually flips up and it'll allow that pin to go underneath of it. Now you can see there is that spring right there. Push down on it and pull out with this. And that's all you need to do. That spring just hooks inside this. So it just comes in and hooks, in and hooks. That's it. So that's the trickiest part as far as tearing that apart. Pin still, if you want, push it in, but don't push it too far because while you're jostling this thing around, there's a chance the pin might go that direction and your little doohickey falls out. Okay, now this pin needs to come out. And this one, there's nothing that's gonna come flying out at you. You just push it out. That spring there, that's the one that was holding that piece on. That's the way it's shaped, that's what it looks like. This here is the actual sear. So now you have the sear out. Well, there went part of it. That pin needs to come out. It's that loose, it falls out. This here falls right out, and this is what you're replacing. Now you probably opened up your package and seen that you have the 2020 Precision sear for the AUG. So now we got to put it back together. This here, if you've got it pointed that direction, that'd be the front of the gun. This would be the back of the gun. Be little hooks here, go that direction. You have two pins laying out. You're going to grab the shorter one, and all you want to do is just line those holes up and slide that back together. That's it. Okay, so the next step would be to slide this back in. But something I want to show you first is that when that spring goes back in, this flat side here, instead of the J side here, is going to sit in that little groove right there. That's where it actually sits down in. So that's what you're going to be shooting for, but it's super easy. Spending a lot of time trying to get it lined up, you'll kind of discover it's a waste of time. So these front pieces here slide in underneath your trigger springs there. Just drops in like that. Here's another issue I had right out of the gate was I threw my pin back in without throwing my spring back in first. So that pin slides through that spring like that. So what's gonna happen is that pin is gonna go through these elongated slots here. And this little hook here go over the top and in between that there. So just slide her in like that. And then, so you just want to make sure that little slot is over that little tab right there. That's how you know you didn't screw your spring up. It jumps around like that. Like I said, this flat piece here will go up against that plastic piece that you just threw in. And then this pin goes through that. What I just do is I just get myself started here. So you can see, maybe you can't see. I just got my pin kind of started. Go ahead and just throw it through that spring. don't get crazy about trying to line a bunch of crap. It's kind of pointless right now. So now we're in all the way. That spring, you're gonna wanna slide over to what would be the gun's left. Make sure that that flat part of that spring doesn't get caught on the little springs for this thing here. Otherwise it won't work, but you should be able to flip this like that. All right, here's where the next tricky spot is. Now you gotta get this back out without pulling it back through. There's a slot here on the back that thing goes into. I just eyeball that till I see the pin just enough out of the way, and then slide this back in that direction. So now what you need to do is get the J hook part of that spring around that little weird little mouthpiece there. So you're going to want to slide this over to the gun's left a little bit. Like I said, you still don't have to worry about getting in the groove. So then what you're going to want to do is push this spring, the J hook side of that spring, down, and that way you can hook it back into this plastic piece here. There's no way I can really show you what I'm doing because my fingers are so fat, but let me see if I can try. It's super simple. You'll feel it as soon as it goes in. And then make sure that that flat piece is in that little groove of this piece here. It should, but it does have a little bit of wiggle room, and it can move around a little bit. So now, as long as you haven't screwed up, the pin should still be sitting where it's supposed to, but right now you're above it. See, we can still go in and out. So if you screw up and forget to pull that pin out, one thing you can do is start pushing down on this and pulling out on that pin a little bit, and you'll feel it as soon as it breaks through underneath of it and gets into that little plastic wall. See how my finger just dropped? So this is gonna have to go down and in. And that's it. Pin's in. You're all back together. That's all it takes. Put this back down, slide it back in. One thing I want to note while I'm making this video, I guess. The other night I was playing around with this when I got to this point here, and just when you push that in, it'll seat back into the groove on the trigger packs. Don't push on it. Once it seats, let it go. If you start pushing on it, you are going to relieve that trigger, and that hammer is going to pop out. Now, there's no way that I know of to reset that trigger. And then once you get back here to the butt, you can tear it all back apart, pull this back out, the guide rods and everything else back out, pull this all off, but there's a lip right here where the stock goes back down, and it won't allow that trigger pack to pull back out if that trigger hammer is up. So what I wound up having to do is I have a really long wooden spoon, and I had to push against the trigger pack like this and just basically just keep ramming that wooden spoon in there until I finally got that thing pushed over, and god awful frustrating. So like I said, word of advice, when you put this back in, don't keep pushing, because you can see it's got give to it, and it makes you kind of go, I wonder what happens if I push that in. Goddamn, don't do it. Put it all back together, ready to fire.